The most common German surname belonged to a man nobody trusted. Millers worked outside the village walls, and their neighbors counted the flour twice. That name is on millions of American mailboxes today. 8 German surnames, 8 trades, counting down to the one carried by more people than any other name in Germany. Stay until number 1, because the reason they distrusted him was not theft, it was something the law itself put on him, and it followed his children for 400 years. Here is the part most families never learn. Your ancestor did not choose his own surname. A clerk chose it. A tax collector, a parish priest, a man with a ledger and a quill. That man watched your ancestor work and wrote down what he saw. The family had no say in it. Then the name stuck, and it was handed down until it reached you. Number 8. Bäcker, the baker. In a German village in the 1400s, a bell rang at 4 in the morning. One man was already awake, and his hands were already in the dough. Bread was not a business in those years. Bread was law. Town councils set the weight of a loaf, and they checked it. In some German towns, a baker caught selling a light loaf was not fined. The baker was put in a cage and dunked in the river, in front of his neighbors. They watched the man who measured their bread that closely. The next 2 names sound plain. One of them has been lying to your family for generations. Number 7. Wagner, the wagon maker. A German village in the 1500s had almost no machines. It had one, the wagon. The wagon carried the harvest to market, the stone to the church, and the dead to the churchyard. When the wagon broke in September, the harvest sat in the field and rotted where it stood. So every village kept one man who could build a wheel that held. A bad wheel did not simply break. A bad wheel killed the horse, the load, and sometimes the driver. Wagner did not patch carts. 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 If your name is Wagner, your family was trusted with the thing everything else depended on. Number 6. Meyer. And here your family was almost certainly told wrong. Meyer, spelled Meyer or Mayer, gets explained as farmer. It is not farmer. The name comes from the Latin word Meyer, meaning the greater one. A Meyer did not work a farm. A Meyer ran a farm for somebody else. Meyer was the Lord's man on the ground. Meyer collected what the other families owed. Meyer wrote down who came up short, and Meyer reported it. So the Meyers were not the neighbors. The Meyers were the ones the neighbors watched. And the next name belonged to more front rooms than any workshop in Germany. The next trade did not have a workshop. It had a front room, and the whole family was in it. Number 5. Weber, the weaver. A loom is not a factory. A loom is furniture. It stood against the wall, and everyone in the house had a job at it. The father threw the shuttle. The children wound the thread. The mother carried the finished cloth to the buyer. Cloth was paid by the yard, so the loom ran on Sunday too. It was never a rich living, but it belonged to the family. If this is your family's story, subscribe. We open another set of names every week. Then came the power loom. On the 4th of June, 1844, in a village called Peterswaldau, the weavers marched. They walked to the houses of the merchants who bought their cloth. The weavers broke those houses open. Prussian troops were sent in. It was over in 2 days. 11 of the weavers were shot. The rest went back to a loom that no longer paid. The loom stopped. The name did not. There are weavers all across America today, and almost none of them have ever touched a thread. That is one trade that outlived its own work. It is not the only one here. The next name belonged to a trade nobody could kill, and to a family that never moved. And there is something about this list I have not told you yet. Now it gets quiet, because the next trade was never killed by a machine. Number 4. Fisher, the fisherman. Go to a German river town today. Stand on the Elbe or the Rhine or the cold northern lakes. The work looks the way it looked 500 years ago. A boat, a net, weather. A man reading water he has read since he was 9 years old. The tools got better. The job did not change. Of the 8 trades here, fisher is the only one you could still learn from your grandfather. A fisher family did not rise, and a fisher family did not fall. Fisher families stayed where the water was, sometimes in the same few streets, for 6 or 7 generations. If your name is Fisher, your line may be the easiest on this list to trace. Your people did not move. But something else was going on in those villages, and it had nothing to do with a man's skill. In the German lands, certain trades were not merely poor. Those trades were dishonorable in law. The word used was unehrlich. A family in one of those trades could be refused entry to a guild. Their sons could be turned away from an apprenticeship. In some places, they could only marry inside the same shunned trades, and the status passed down to the children. It was not about the man. It was about the work, and one of these 8 names was on that list. So is this the one? The trade that made a family dishonorable? People laughed at this one for 500 years, so it would fit. Number 3. Schneider, the tailor. The German word schneiden means to cut. A Schneider cut cloth. In the old village order that made him a small man, Schneider sat while other men stood. Schneider worked indoors while other men worked in weather. Schneider worked indoors while other men worked in weather. Schneider worked indoors while other men worked in weather. Schneider worked indoors while other men worked in weather. German folk tales are full of tailors, and the tailor is almost always the joke. But no, the tailor had a guild. The tailor had standing. Mockery is not the same thing as law. And here is what the joke missed anyway. A tailor needed no land. A tailor needed no forge, no mill, no team of horses. A tailor needed his hands, his shears, and one trunk. When the ships began leaving Bremen and Hamburg for New York, that mattered more than any skill on this list. A farmer who left Germany left everything behind him. A tailor who left Germany carried his whole trade with him. By the middle of the 1800s, German tailors were working in the German wards of Cincinnati and Milwaukee. They cut cloth the same way their fathers cut it in Württemberg. The shears crossed the ocean in a box. The farm could not cross at all, so the tailor is not the one, which leaves the man the whole village looked up to. Now the top of the village. Nobody stood higher than this man. Number 2, Schmidt. The smith. Schmidt is the second most common surname in Germany, and the reason is plain. Every settlement needed one. The smith made the plow that broke the ground. The smith made the shoe that kept the horse walking. The smith made the nail that held the roof, and the blade that took the harvest in. The wagon maker needed the smith. The miller needed the smith. Everyone needed the smith, and the smith needed nobody. That is also why there are so many Schmidts. Not because the work was easy. Every village on the map had to have one, and the son took the fire from the father. The name multiplied across 1,000 separate villages at once, and those families were not related. The smith also worked with fire and iron, in a village that could not explain either, that looked close to something else. In old German custom, the smith stood a little apart from everyone else. A man who bent hard things and made them obey, and then the trade ended. Not slowly. Within a lifetime or two of the first factories, the village smith was gone from most places. The trade at the very top of this list disappeared faster than the weaving at the bottom of it. Status saved nothing at all. What survived was the word, which leaves one name, and the promise I made at the start. Now the thing I promised you in the first 10 seconds. I said a whole category of German trades was dishonorable in law. Here is what that looked like on the ground. Picture a boy of 14 in a Franconian town. He wants to learn to make barrels. He has the hands for it. The guild asks one question first, and it is not about the boy. It is about his father's trade. If the answer is wrong, the boy goes home. So does his son after him. That was the system. The word for it was unehrlich. The knacker, the man who hauled away dead animals, was shut out almost everywhere. So was the executioner. The bathkeeper was shut out in many places. The shepherd was shut out in some. Their children married inside the same shunned trades, because nobody else would have them, and the status passed down again. And here is where I have to be honest with you. Half of what gets written about this is romantic invention, repeated for 200 years. The category was real. The list was not. It changed from region to region and from century to century, and no complete catalog of it has ever existed. A trade could be shameful on one bank of a river and respectable on the other. Families crossed rivers for exactly that reason, and their descendants never knew why. But in parts of the German lands, across several centuries, one more trade was on that list. Number 1. Müller, the miller. He did nothing wrong. That is the answer, and it took 400 years to be fair to him. The miller was not distrusted for what he did, but for where he stood. A mill needs falling water or open wind, so it was often built outside the village. Past the last house, past the last fence. The miller lived out there. Then the arrangement. A farmer brought his grain, and the miller kept a share of the flour. Not coins, flour. So the miller measured what came in, measured what went out, and took his cut. No farmer could check the measure. He was necessary. He was often the richest man for miles. He was alone, out past the fence, and he held the one thing every family needed to eat. That is the whole story. Suspicion is what people feel about a man they cannot do without and cannot watch. So here is what your German surname actually is. It is not a record of what your ancestor was. It is a record of what his neighbors decided about him. A stranger with a ledger wrote it down. His children carried it for centuries, whether it was fair or not. Millions of Americans carry Miller and Müller and Miller. Almost none have pictured a wheel turning in cold water outside a village they could not name. If your name is on this list, tell me which one and the town it came from. Every name on this list described work, except one. Meyer described who your ancestor answered to. There are more German names like it. Schultz, Vogt, Richter. Those men did not work beside your ancestors. They stood over them,